Hello everyone and welcome to my yearly eyeshadow palette ranking video where in the year of 2021 we're going to rank a haul of 8 palettes. And despite the fact that we have under 10 palettes, I'm sure we're still going to be here rambling for half an hour. Before I start this video, I just wanted to say that this is the first year in the past 3 years that I have doubted if I want to do an eyeshadow palette ranking video, because I just felt like ranking 7 palettes is almost ludicrous. But then again, I thought, I have 7 palettes, I can rank them in an ascending order, and for one, I am pretty proud of myself for not buying more than 10 palettes this year. The amount of palettes that I've been ranking has slowly been decreasing over the past couple of years, especially since the first year I did it, which was 2018, when I ranked 20 or 21 eyeshadow palettes. And personally, I feel like it's a step forward for me to be ranking less palettes, because it means that I have narrowed down my taste. I have really honed down on what my favorite formulas are, on what my favorite brands are, on what works for me, what I enjoy and use the most in my collection, and not just frivolously, without too much thinking about it, buy stuff just because it's not really that expensive. Like eyeshadow palettes from Juvia's Place, Colourpop, there are so many brands out there now that do pretty good quality, affordable eyeshadow palettes, and if you were to try all of them, you would have a book closet full of eyeshadow palettes, and you could knock yourself out buying all of them, trying all of them and ranking them. But that is just not how I work. I prefer to have something a little bit more curated that I'm really going to get use out of and enjoy. I feel like for 7 palettes we have still a pretty good representation of different brands. Not to anyone's surprise, the predominant brand is going to be Pat McGrath Labs, because as I have mentioned over so many videos in the past couple of years, I truly really enjoy her eyeshadow formula the most out of everything I have tried, and believe me, I have tried it all. I've tried the loose indie eyeshadows, the pressed indie eyeshadows, I've tried the multi-chromes from the indie companies, I've tried the super special flaky duochromy things from indie brands, and just nothing is as elegant to me as the Pat McGrath Blitz VR and Astral shades. Nothing is as versatile, and I just have so much respect for her as a person, as a woman of color who has achieved such tremendous success. And I also consider the products that she creates to be very unique, very, you know, different type of niche on the market that we really needed. And I don't know why I'm going on this tangent about Pat McGrath Labs. I'm trying to justify why I have like 90% Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow palettes. Without further ado, I'm going to do this ranking as usual in an ascending order, starting from the bottom and working our way up to the top. Usually I start these rankings saying that whoever is at the bottom is not there because it's a bad palette, or I don't like it, or there's anything wrong with it. It's just that someone has to be at the bottom. This year, that is not the case. Those of you who have seen my review are not going to be the least surprised that I'm not only ranking last, but also disliking with a passion the 2 quads that were released by Pat McGrath Labs this year. I only have one of them left. This is Bronze Borealis. Let me open to show it to you. If I had to put a palette at the very bottom at the 8th position, that would be the now decluttered Deep Space Divinity quad, because I really disliked that quad. I'm going to explain myself in a second. And in the 7th position, very close by, would be the Bronze Borealis quad from that very same release. If you've already seen my first impression video on these, you know that I was extremely disappointed in these, and so there were so many reasons for that. Where do I even start? I look forward to Pat McGrath's holiday releases every year because she has never disappointed me. She has always given me exactly what I was hoping, and she has always surprised me with giving me something unexpected. In the year 2018, she gave us those beautiful Opulence 6 pans. In 2019, she went a step up and she gave us those fabulous quads with only the special shades in them, the Blitz, the VRs and the Astrals. Loved it. Then in 2019 she said, I'm doing Luxe quads, and I was like, oh, I don't know how that's going to go. But then I was blown away because she gave us something like Interstellar Icon and Risque Rose with incredibly surprising, impactful and glittery eyeshadows in there in interesting color configurations. And when she said this year that she was releasing the Celestial Odyssey Big Palette as well as 2 Luxe quads, I was like, can it get any better? You know, as the anticipation was building up, I was like, oh, I don't know, these don't look very impressive, but you know, it's Pat McGrath. She can do no wrong. She will not disappoint me. The eyeshadows will come in here and they will be incredible. And then the two look squads came in, and imagine my disappointment when I found out that Pat McGrath has given us the most, I'm sorry to say that, I can't believe I'm putting pat and boring in the same sentence, the most boring palettes that you can ever imagine. And not boring in a good way. One could consider some of her other eyeshadow palettes to be boring, but these truly were boring. So as far as the Deep Space Divinity quad goes, I did not like that quad for two reasons. First of all, the more bronzy shade and the more champagne shade were extremely similar to the ones present in this quad. Then there were two eyeshadows in the Deep Space Divinity quad that just did not work for me personally. Maybe they are your favorite undertones, but they do not work for me. These like deep maroon, purple-based maroon shades look god-awful on me because these types of colors make me look tired. And the duochrome eyeshadow in that quad, in the Deep Space Divinity quad, was this eyeshadow. This is Insomnia from Makeup Geek, aka Blue Brown from MAC. One could even argue that the eyeshadow that we have from Makeup Geek is of better quality than the one from Pat McGrath, because to me this was shinier and more reflective than the one from Pat McGrath. The one from Pat McGrath was more dialed down. This is another eyeshadow that I have tried to like for years, and I just never liked the way it looked on me until I reached the conclusion that these types of maroony, purpley based eyeshadows just do not work for my complexion. And then we've got this quad here, the Bronze Borealis quad, where I would argue probably the best shade is this one over here. This like mauvey, purpley, neutral kind of shade. It's a very interesting tone, a very nice eyeshadow, very beautiful creamy metallic shade. This deeper mauve matte shade, also of great quality. I actually have to say that there is an eyeshadow in each of these quads that was of poor quality, and that's this one over here, the more champagne shade in both of these quads. For me personally, has this, I don't know whether you can see it, extremely flaky, crumbly, balling up texture to it that is not like Pat McGrath. It is, I mean, you can work it into the lid to apply, okay, but there is something about the texture of this eyeshadow that I feel like is wrong, and something went wrong in the process of making these two eyeshadows, but I can't tell you what it is. I've never had an eyeshadow from Pat McGrath that does this to me. If she had put these eyeshadows in cardboard packaging and charged 45 euros per piece, I would have been like, okay, they're called quads, they contain simple metallic and shimmer shades, there's nothing sparkly, there's nothing extraordinary, there's really nothing Pat McGrath-esque about these quads. So why is she putting them in the black lacquer packaging, dialed down black lacquer packaging if I may say so myself, with smaller pans, and charging Lux Quads prices for these? There is not a single sparkly shade in here, not a single particle of glitter. So, after 10 minutes of rambling, I hope I have convinced you that these two quads deserve their last position and their status of being unloved because they're just bad. They're bland, they're boring, they're one note, they're flat, they are all the adjectives that you can think of to describe something that is the opposite of exciting and what we have come to expect of Pat McGrath, which is, I think, extraordinary. The Bronze Borealis quad I have kept for this video specifically, and I think I'm going to give it away to my mom-in-law because I did her makeup with it when she was here 2 weeks ago, and I think it looked pretty nice on her. And because they're so toned down, I think it's something that she can use a bit more easily and she will enjoy a bit more than I am. At the position number 6, we have the Natasha Denona Face&Eye Glam palette. Those were released a couple of months ago, and the only reason I am ranking this almost at the bottom is because I just haven't had enough time to own it and play around with it and form a full opinion on it. But what I can tell you from the few times that I have used it is that I adore it. The blush is a gorgeous tone, it's a cream to powder formula, so it looks very natural on the skin. The highlighter has that beautiful lightweight texture to it. It also works very well as an inner corner highlight shade because in the eyeshadow portion of this palette you don't actually have, or at least for someone of my skin tone, there is no like inner corner kind of highlight shade. As far as the eyeshadows go, I love the tones of these. These are warmer tones of browns that I really like to wear, and there is one eyeshadow in here which is a little bit cooler toned and so dimensional, and it has such an interesting texture to it. It's one of those eyeshadows that makes your eyelids look wet, that Natasha Denona doesn't like to give us very often, even though she knows how to make them. But I'm so happy that she put both of these in this palette, because both of these have this effect. And while this one is a gorgeous tone, it's like a bronzy, reddy neutral, it's a bit deeper. This one is my absolute favorite and the absolute standout in this palette, because it has so much going on to it. It's a... I don't know how to describe it. It's a more cool toned eyeshadow, but I feel like not so much because of its base tones. I think its base tones are grounded more in like warmer tones, but it has that overlay of like silvery taupe glitter, which gives it this beautiful cool toned glass effect. And I love how this eyeshadow looks on the eyelids. I think she did a great job curating this specific palette, and something that I have come to accept with my relationship with Natasha Denona this year is that it seems like I like the way she does monochromatic way more than I like the way she does colorful eyeshadow palettes, because I have not been tempted to own that Circo Loco palette or the Zendo palette or any of her more colorful eyeshadow palette releases, but I have truly enjoyed owning the gold, the bronze and the glam palette, which are all monochromatic palettes. And this one is another addition to that monochromatic family of eyeshadow palettes from Natasha that I'm truly really enjoying. And there's something to be said about the fact that I am enjoying a palette which contains both face and eye products, because usually I am the kind of creature that likes her things to be separated. I don't like to mix different types of products in one palette, and in this specific format and in this specific palette I actually don't mind. At position number 5 we have an eyeshadow palette that I almost forgot came out this year, but this did come out in 2021. It was in the very beginning of 2021. This is the Eternal Eden quad from Pat McGrath Labs, which she released for Valentine's Day of this year. Now you will find this almost a bit oxymoronic, because as it is, this is also another quad from Pat McGrath Labs that doesn't contain technically any extraordinary shades. There is nothing in here that is very glittery, very duochromy or very sparkly, but for whatever reason this quad does not offend me as much as the Luxe quads that she released for the holidays. First of all, she kept this in the original, like more luxurious packaging with the raised lettering of her brand logo over here, the bigger sized pans, and I just feel like with this quad I knew from the beginning what I was getting into. I wasn't promised anything very glitzy, I was promised a very romantic Valentine's themed eyeshadow palette, and that is exactly what I got. And I actually enjoy all the 4 colors in here. I think this is a really beautiful, very mid-toned mauve brown, which looks great on me personally. As someone who doesn't rock the cool tones all too well, this one works really well for me. I really enjoy the tone of this pink because it is a warmer toned, more yellow based pink, which Pat doesn't give us very often. She prefers her more cool toned pink, so I think this is a nice refreshment. Refreshment? Can I use that in that context? I don't know. I really enjoy this shade here. This is the most done and overdone eyeshadow in the history of makeup ever. It is a pink peach golden duochrome, and on top of that it comes in a very subtle satin finish. This is not even a metallic, this is a satin. But for whatever reason, when I put it on my lids and then I spritz the tiniest bit of Fix Plus just on the center of my lid to make it look a little bit more wet, it looks so girly and so feminine and so romantic that I don't mind not having the glitz. And if I really want the glitz, I always have Ritualistic Rose, where I have the very sparkly sister of this eyeshadow. And then this one is technically not considered to be one of Pat's most extraordinary shades, but it is such a beautiful eyeshadow. It has so much depth and so much richness to it, and beautiful formula that just goes on forever. And I feel like there's a little bit of blue sparkle in here, but don't quote me on that. I'm sure there are people out there who would qualify this quad as boring, but I like to think of products also in their context. This was a Valentine's Day release, and I think for a Valentine's Day release it served its purpose beautifully. Whereas the Luxe Quads are meant to be a holiday release, so they need to serve a completely different purpose, and I don't feel like they do that. If they were, you know, everyday staples from Pat McGrath Labs, I'd be like, okay, they are that, but they are not something that you would want to slather your eyeballs with for New Year's Eve. Jesus Christ, 3 palettes and I've been here for 25 minutes. I told you the amount of palettes may be decreasing, but the amount of time that I ramble seems to be increasing. At position number 4, we have another quad from Pat McGrath Labs, which I feel like is a true representation of what a Luxe quad is supposed to be. And that is the Voyeuristic Vixen quad that was released for spring of 2021. This is beautiful, this is gorgeous, this is everything you want from a Luxe quad from Pat McGrath. The luxurious packaging, the big pans, the cohesive color story, and your extraordinary shade. The shade Rosefire Nectar here is probably one of the most impactful shades that Pat McGrath has released this year that is not in a Mothership palette. Although this shade is very impactful, it is for the first time a texture that reminds me of an indie eyeshadow that I have seen before, and those are the JD Glow Galaxy eyeshadows. And I know this is going to sound petty, but I don't want my eyeshadow from a Pat McGrath Labs quad to feel like a JD Glow eyeshadow. I want it to feel like a Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow. So I personally would prefer it if she sticks to those like drier, grittier textures that some people seem to not be a super huge fan of, but I think are the epitome of Pat McGrath Labs special shades and what I would prefer to see in her Luxe quads. I don't want to be reminded of indie eyeshadows when I touch her textures, because to me this is what sets her brand miles away from indie eyeshadows, is the textures. The color dupes, the duochrome dupes, we've seen them all, they've been around forever, nothing new. We know indies can do those spectacularly, but what they can't do is the textures that Pat McGrath Labs can. That's as simple as that. It's a fact of life and I stand by it. This is the perfect little neutral quad for everyday looks, for more glitzy looks, for in-between kind of looks. I just have really enjoyed using it over the course of this year, and I think it is one of the best palettes that Pat has released in 2021. In position number 3, we have an eyeshadow palette from a brand that I did not see coming. Okay, if someone had told me in the beginning of 2021 that I would be purchasing a eyeshadow palette from NARS and ranking it in my top 3, I would have been like, dude, you are on some sort of a trip. I don't know what you've taken, but please share, because I would like to join in on that trip. It must be a hilarious one. And yet here we are ranking the NARS Climax 9-pan eyeshadow palette at position number 3, and very rightfully so. I don't know what is more to say about this palette that I haven't already said before, because I've talked about this palette on several occasions in the past couple of months, but I think that NARS must have been, you know, taking notes. The people in their headquarters must finally have been online reading people's comments and asking what people want and actually taking in that information, because they took it in and then they bottled it down into the most perfect fall eyeshadow palette that you can ever think of. The mattes are very blendable, very easy to work with, and the majority of these shimmers are really impactful shimmers, the type of shimmers that will look elegant, that will give you a little bit of that like wet gloss effect on your lid. And what I've discovered is, as someone who usually likes to apply these sort of metallic shades with my fingers, I've actually found out that these shades apply really well with a brush, and when you work them in a little bit with a brush, that gloss effect seems to intensify even more, in the sense that the more like sheerly you apply them almost, the more that gloss effect seems to come through even more. I really love the little olive green tone moment that we have over here, with tones that don't lean too taupe and they don't lean too golden. They're truly like neutral olive greens, and I know Alice would disagree with me, but I think this is such a stunning take on a blue eyeshadow. I don't know that I have seen any brand make a more beautiful, subtle slate blue ever before. This is so unique and so stunning. And if you have seen my top 10 favorite makeup products for 2021, it will be of absolutely no surprise to you what my top 2 favorite eyeshadow palettes for 2021 were and what exactly their order will be. But in second place we have the Mothership release for this year. This is the Mothership 9 Huetopian Dream palette released in the summer of 2021. Okay guys, I am back. We had to put Nicola down for a nap because he was clearly very tired. As you could hear in the background, it was quite dramatic. I actually really like this palette. First of all, I am always so excited when Dame Mother is gracing us with a new Mothership release because those are my favorite palettes that she comes out with. I want to start off by saying that to me this palette does not look like an extension to the Divine Rose line. I still feel like this color story has a completely different like base tone vibe to it. To me this is more of like a coral with some interesting pops of color when it comes to the duochrome shades over here. I feel like she took her regular astral formula and then she put 10% more power in it because these feel even more impactful than her usual astrals. And it's very interesting that I've heard from a lot of people that this shade here, the Astral Venusian Orchid shade, is quite a disappointment to them because any way they use it, it just looks super gold on them. And I have to say, for me, that is my personal favorite shade in this palette because I find it to be so versatile when I do my layerings, because I feel like the shift is much more of a lime green than it really is gold. So I really enjoy this eyeshadow. Maybe my one criticism of an eyeshadow in this palette will be one that is also not fully founded in complete facts yet, is the multichrome shade. First of all, the multichrome shade, disappointingly enough, does not come in her VR formula, which was the case for her first multichrome in the Divine Rose 2 palette. This is just a regular metallic shade, and I still cannot understand the reasoning behind this decision because I far preferred the VR formula. But what I will say is that I had a feeling that this shade just did not perform as well as I was expecting it to, and I still have plans to make a video where I do one of my eyes with this shade and one of my eyes with the multichrome from Divine Rose 2, and then I wear them throughout the day. Hey Lisa! And then we compare how the two perform and how they look and whether the VR formula really is superior to this one. It's actually quite the bummer because in terms of tones, I like this multichrome better than I like the one in Divine Rose 2 because everything in the Divine Rose 2 palette is just a little bit more cool toned. The pink shift, the green shift, whereas here everything leans a little bit warmer, which would be my personal taste. But unfortunately, I find that it comes in a more disappointing texture. And another thing I will say is that for me this eyeshadow palette is still hanging a little bit in the limbo, as in I still don't know where I would place it if I were to do my Pat McGrath palette ranking again, because I still don't think it will take the spot of my top 5 or even top 6, but I've not gotten to know it enough to properly be able to place it. So for now we stand at I really like it. It is one of my favorite eyeshadow palette releases this year, but at the same time it's hanging a little bit in the air. And the biggest surprise of all is that I am ranking the Mega Mothership Celestial Divinity eyeshadow palette as my #1 eyeshadow palette of this year. Surprising for many reasons, one of them being that I'm placing an eyeshadow palette which does not contain any VRs, astrals or blitz formulas in its contents higher than one that does, and that is just as shocking and surprising to me as it is to you. Sometimes it's incredibly hard to tell rationally why something comes and just sweeps you off your feet, and I cannot rationally tell you why this specific palette came around this year and did that for me, but it did. I really love it. It is my favorite eyeshadow palette that has been released this year. I have been reaching a lot for it and I have enjoyed every single look that I have created with it. I think it gives you a lot of variety when it comes to the types of looks that you can create with it. I think you can go very neutral, you can go very warm toned and create beautiful fiery looks. You can create something very glitzy, very New Year's Eve like. You can go cool toned. I don't know, there's just all the possibilities are there. If you wanted to go strawberry milkshake, you can go strawberry milkshake, and all of that delivered in Pat's best formulas in this specific format. I never expect her to give to give us VRs, Blitz and Astros in this format, because this is cheaper, it is meant to be a bit more approachable and affordable, so I understand why there aren't any special shades in here. But to be honest with you, compared to the two Luxe Quads, I would say there are quite a lot of special shades in this specific palette. The two standouts for me in this palette have to be the Citrine Envy shade, this beautiful golden toned, very dimensional green shade, and the shade Bronze Nova. Bronze Nova has just come and blown every other neutral shade out of the water, and every time I want to do a neutral look now, I just want to use Bronze Nova because it has so much going on to it. There is, you know, the bronze shift, there is a bit of gold, there is a bit of antique green, and it just looks so beautiful and rich on the eyes without needing a lot of glitter. Like, this is not a glittery shade, this is a metallic shade, and yet there is something about it which gives it enough strength to stand on its own legs and hold its own. And I really like it when a neutral eyeshadow can do that for me, because usually when I put neutral eyeshadows I have to put something very glittery on top of them in order to feel excited and like to feel this like jolt of like, whoa, that looks awesome. Whereas with this shade I don't necessarily feel that way. Of course, I will also not spare Pat the criticism of putting like 5 pink eyeshadows in here, when she has given us so much pink over the course of the last years. But at the same time, they're also different undertone of pink. They're a more berry toned pink. I feel like they're a more flattering undertone of pink on me personally, so I'm not too mad about having these in this eyeshadow palette. Some of these shadows I already knew really well, like the shade Corrupt Copper, which happens to be one of my favorite like one and done eyeshadows because it has so much dimension to it. Yes, you don't get many mattes in this eyeshadow palette, but I feel like you could make do with what you have gotten, and I don't pay Pat McGrath to give me matte eyeshadows. I pay Pat McGrath to give me metallic eyeshadows because that is where she truly stands out. So personally, by me, she doesn't have to add more mattes to these palettes. I know that is a criticism other people have had, that they would have liked to see more mattes in here. Yours truly does not want to see more mattes. She wants to see more special metallic shades. Okay, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I've been rambling for over an hour about 8 freaking eyeshadow palettes. How did that even happen? I'm going to try to edit this to a concise and reasonable amount of time to spend rambling on only 8 eyeshadow palettes. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know, I'm very curious, what were your top 3 palettes that you purchased in the year of 2021. They don't have to be palettes that were released this year. They can also be palettes that were released 3 years ago, but that you just purchased this year. As usual, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!